You thought Total CMS was awesome before? Just wait till you watch this video. Hey everybody, Joe Workman here, and today I'm really excited to release Total CMS version 1.4. Okay, this is kind of like the fourth major update of Total CMS, and we got another great improvement for blog and a bunch of other great little fixes here and there, right? This is just a really great update. And what I want to do in this video is think of this as like a video of the release notes, okay? I'm going to go through pretty much line by line of the release notes, talk about everything, tell you and teach you about all the new stuff in Total CMS 1.4. Okay, it's probably going to be a lengthy video, so if you got some popcorn, this is going to be entertaining stuff, right? Hopefully I won't bore you. Okay, but first things first, this update is completely revamped and requires Stacks 3.5. Okay, a lot of work went into adding some of the great new performance features of Stacks 3.5 all throughout Total CMS. So we should have some nicer, faster editing in edit mode, right? Preview should be faster in some cases, right? So all in all, a nice update. It now requires Stacks 3.5. Hopefully you're also running RapidWeaver 7. Some of the preview things work better in RapidWeaver 7 just because the preview in RapidWeaver 7 is hot, okay? It's just better. So if you're still on RapidWeaver 6, jump on the RW7 bandwagon, right? RW7 bandwagon. Toot toot. It's fun. It's nice. Please jump onto RapidWeaver 7. It is a great piece of software, and it's just the way things are going. So RapidWeaver 7, awesome, much better preview engine, especially for Total CMS. So please update to that. Okay, public service announcement over. Let's get back into Total CMS 1.4. Again, like I said, I'm just going to be going through all of the release notes, okay? And then I'm going to be kind of jumping back and forth between RapidWeaver and the website, right? To give you a quick preview of what it's doing right now. Like what is the awesome new stuff inside Total CMS 1.4 in like 30 seconds, okay? And I have a nice little web page. Let's jump on over and have a look. So here is a little preview, and this demo project is now available for download on Weaverspace. So if you go to weaverspace.s/total CMS, I think it is. Go to the Total CMS space onside Weaverspace, and you can download this exact project, okay? And this is built with Total CMS 1.4. The big thing with Total CMS, or one of the big things with Total CMS 1.4, is an entirely new blog layout engine. Okay, the blog list stack has been completely revamped again for the third time, and it is even better and more powerful than it was before. Okay, as you see, this sort of layout is now possible inside Total CMS 1.4. It was made famous by RealMac, kind of has in their blog, they were using this sort of format. So obviously everyone loves it. It's using some of the greatest new web layout technologies. And so we are now doing that inside Total CMS. As you see here, it kind of, not really randomly, but it does give you a nice layout where the first post is full width. Then we have some, a grid where this is 3, here's 2. Then we have another full width post, right? So it gives you a nice kind of a dynamic, this is called flex layout, right? So it gives us a nice flex layout. We still have our traditional grid. So if you go to the grid, you'll see that we still have the traditional grid layout here. We still have a list layout available. So if you just want to have, your posts as, kind of in a list view. Now here's something that is completely new that is very, very cool. If you notice here, we have a grid of just images, right? And all of this is powered from a blog. And if you notice when I hover over these, we have a nice effect. There's tons of really great effects that we can choose from and we can configure. And when I hover over, I see the title. And when I click through, it'll take me to the blog post. So here's just another great way to show our blog layouts. We can do a similar thing where we have circles, right? So we can have a circle, each one for a blog post. It brings in an image from that blog post. Hover over it, you see the title and the date. You can click through and go straight to your blog post, right? So a really great, powerful blog engine. Now, a couple things you might not have noticed. If you notice here on the homepage, we have an author image. How cool is that, right? So we can now have specific images for every author. Here we have one from Rob Ziebel, and here we have hipster John Hawkins, okay? So you can now have images for authors. And not only for authors, now I don't have an example of it here, but you can also do images for tags and categories. Really, really cool stuff. Next up, if we noticed inside, in one of these I had it, I think it was in the list view. Okay, we also now have the ability to add how long a post is. So this particular post has a 1-minute read. Okay, this particular post has a 121-minute read. It's a really long post, right? So basically, Total CMS now can calculate how long it will take a user to read a particular blog post, just as some of the more popular blog posting sites out there have, right? So some really cool options there. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna look at the release notes, and then I'm kind of gonna go down, maybe not bullet for bullet, right? But I'm gonna review all of the, in the order of the release notes, we're gonna go through everything, okay? So, again, get a piece of popcorn, or not a piece, you need like a whole bag of popcorn, right? Get some popcorn and enjoy the show. Here we go. Okay, so here we are on my doc portal, right? I know you've been to this site, right? docs.joeworkman.net, okay? And go to RapidWeaver Stacks, Total CMS, Release Notes. And here we go. Okay, so first off, we're gonna be talking about dates. Dates are an important part of the CMS, especially the blog, right? Because there are so many different ways we wanna display time and dates for our various posts, okay? There's a lot of feature requests around dates, and I think we've nailed it, okay? I'm really excited about this one. I know dates seem like such a little thing, but we worked for a long time on all the possibilities on what we can do with dates. First off, we can do relative time. Okay, so let's say we can display that a post was 5 minutes ago, or 1 week ago, 2 months ago, 1 year ago, right? All that relative time is definitely possible now. And then we can also do named months. Okay, we're not stuck with just numbers anymore. You can now do named months. Okay, so you can do January, or the short Jan, right? Or September, or Sep, right? So you can have long and short versions of the months. Now, both of these require the next great feature is that all date components are now localized into 7 different languages. That is really, really cool, right? So we have 7 of the most popular languages with RapidWeaver users, okay, already done. So English, German, Spanish, Dutch, Danish, French, and Italian, okay? All those languages are supported throughout the CMS now for dates and other things, which we'll get to later, okay? We now have the date picker is also localized. So the actual little calendar window, okay? That picker now supports time. So we're able to do dates and time, which is really important, okay? And then we also have custom formats. And so let's jump into RapidWeaver and see some of these changes now. Okay, so first off, let's go into the blog post stack, okay? Or yeah, the blog admin post, okay? Where we input the date. Okay, so here we'll see that we have multiple formats now. If we go to the date format inside the date stack. Now, if you want to use the time picker, right? So if you want to be able to display time as well as date, you need to check this show time picker. Okay, now where do we define our languages for these dates? Now, throughout the entire CMS, all the languages have been centralized, all the settings have been centralized inside Admin Core and CMS Core now. Okay, so if I go ahead and go into my Admin Core stack and go down to there's a localization settings group. Oops, I just collapsed it by accident. If we go down to the localization settings group, you'll see that there's a language. Let's go ahead and set that to Spanish. Okay. Now we also need to set up CMS Core. Now on this page, I happen to have Admin Core and CMS Core. So we're going to want to make sure that we go ahead and change both. So inside CMS Core, we're going to set the language to be Spanish as well. Okay, that was inside of a partial, which you're using, right? Partials? Great. So now when I preview my page, we'll see that the date format here is the date format that I chose inside the stack. Okay, and if I click on it, we'll see that this entire date picker is now in Spanish. Okay, so we have the Spanish, the name of the month, the days of the week, right? And if we want to select time, we can go ahead and select a day, and then we have a time picker as well. So if I want 10 o'clock, 10:30, there we go. So I picked, October 4th at 10:30. Okay, so that's a great date picker now that is localized. We can choose dates and times. Now on the content side, it works pretty much identically the same. Here I have a blog list from the image hover page, okay? And if we look at the date here, we can choose what format we want, okay? Or relative time. Again, it's going to, now I've already set this site to use Spanish, okay? So if we set, again, relative time, and I preview this page, what you'll see is when I hover over, I get my new blog post title, and then I have the relative time in Spanish, which is really cool. Now, I tried to add as many of the most popular date formats here as possible, okay? But there's obviously going to be some date formats that you're just going to want to have that I don't have here as options, right? So when that comes, we have something called custom format. Go ahead and choose custom format. And here you'll see that there is a date format string that you can choose, okay? Now you'll see from the tooltip here that there's a website that you can view. Now this website address is also inside the release notes, okay? Let's go ahead and look at this site. Now here we are on Moment.js, which is a very popular time framework that Total CMS leverages for all of its dates, okay? And in this table, you'll see that there are tokens, and it shows you the token and what that token outputs. So if you wanted, a 2-digit month, you would do capital M, capital M. Now be very careful. The case matters here. It has to be identical. So a single M will be a single digit month. MO will be, first, second, third, fourth, fifth. And again, all this is localized in all 7 languages. Okay. So even though it, here on like days of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, if you want to display that, you can just use the little D's. Okay. And of course, all of that is localized in your language. So you see there's lots of options here for pretty much every combination of date you could ever want. Okay. So let's do an example. Let's say I wanted to do, like this, let's just steal this date format right here. Okay. I could just copy that format. So this is going to be Sunday, February 14th, 2010, and then the time, and then the AM or PM. Okay. And as you see here, if you look at this, if you want colons or you want commas, you just add that into, any punctuation that you want, you add into the formatting string. So here I am back inside this, and let's go ahead and paste in that format that we saw on that site. Okay. This is a pretty long one, but let's go ahead and preview it. And again, remember, we're in Spanish, right? So this, I haven't even tested this. This should, boom, it previews perfectly. Again, this is really long, probably not the best example in this particular scenario, but it shows you exactly what we can do. And it's all localized into Spanish as well. Very powerful, very cool stuff here. Okay, so next up, we're going to be looking at the blog post stack, right? So what can we do with blog posts? There are some warnings. You'll see a bunch of little warnings in preview mode now, or you won't if you have everything set up properly, right? But I've added a bunch of little warnings and automatic little checkers to help you implement, Total CMS and blog a little bit. Like, hey, maybe your blog post is not correct, or your website address, or things like that, right? So little things that we've been getting for support requests for months, years actually now, right? I've kind of automated a lot of those things where in some respects I automatically fix them for you, and in other things I just alert you so that you know exactly what to fix. So that's very cool. A lot of kind of background things and updates that happened within blog setup and Total CMS in general. Okay. We also have warnings when a blog post stack, is used outside of the main blog post. So if you try to put, tags outside of the blog post, right? We'll show you that in a little bit. Okay, next up, let's review some of the changes that we have on the blog post stack. This is the content side of the blog, okay? And it is on the blog post, so the main blog post page. In the blog post stack, you'll notice that there is a new setting here for ignore draft posts. Now, if you weren't aware, by default, if you set a blog post to be a draft, right? That blog post, while by default it doesn't show up in the blog list, and again, I say by default because all this stuff is configurable and you can change it all in various settings, okay? By default, all draft posts are hidden from blog lists. However, if someone happened to know the URL to a blog post that is set to be a draft, it's publicly viewable on the web. Okay. Obviously, that's not a horrible thing because someone would have to know the exact URL because it's not linked to from everywhere. But with that said, there is now this new setting to ignore a draft post. So if a blog post is noticed that it's a draft, okay, it will not load on the blog post page. It will basically act as if that blog post was not found. Now you can use the blog post rules inside the blog post stack to say, if blog post isn't found, either redirect to a page or display some other default content, okay? But it is important to say that the draft post is not displayed at all when that setting is checked, okay? By default, it's unchecked because that is the behavior from before, and I didn't want to break anyone's existing websites, okay? But that's a very cool, I think, necessary setting that we've needed to we needed to have. Now, another thing we'll notice is in the blog post stack, when we add child stacks here, you'll notice that it is much easier now to find the stacks that you might want to add, okay? Now, there are a few new stacks here. You'll see that there is now a words and read time. Now, inside the words and read time stack, you can define the label, so you can localize that. There is no automatic localization here. Just type in minutes read or whatever, okay, in your language. If you want to calculate the read time, which it does by default, you can define the number of words per minute. Okay. Now, if you uncheck the calculate read time, what this will display is the number of words in that blog post. So you probably want to change this label instead of saying min read to say words or, whatever words is in your language. Okay. And then the other settings, just kind of common settings in a lot of the other blog post stacks for styling and formatting and alignment and all that jazz. Now, another new stack is the layout rule stack. Now, the layout rule stack isn't new, but it got really nicely revamped in this update, okay? So before you can only have one layout rule. Here we now have a lot of many different rules. So we can filter by author, category, tag. We can search a particular field for content, right? So I can search a permalink, I can search the title, I can search the content, extra content, I can do word count, okay? I can, search the full content, the summary, author. So you can filter out, and define custom content when this particular rule is matched. You can see if content, here, let's turn off some of these so it doesn't get confusing. We can do empty. So if permalink is empty, then display this, right? And then we can also do based on count. So if the word count is greater than, less than, or equal to a particular amount, you can then display content. Now, there's also else logic. So if you look in this, we now have if my condition is true, display this, else display that, right? So a lot of this is maybe you want to display an image or, you want to display an embed or something like that based on conditions inside your blog posts, okay? And it's important now if you check multiple of these layout rule options, okay, it is and. So if I can do if the author is Joe Workman and the category is test and the tag is tag, then display this, right? So again, all these are chained together. It is an and logic. Now, last but not least, the blog macro hints stack got a nice little update. There's a bunch of new macros here for dates. Okay, so if you want to display the date numbers and whatnot, you can do that now. Okay. Next is you'll notice inside the settings. Previously, the stack had 0 settings, but there's a problem with macros in that you can't copy them from this. It's great that we have this little hints thing, but you can't copy them. It makes it really hard. So now I have settings here where you can actually just copy the text. Again, if you change these, it's going to do absolutely nothing. The only purpose of these settings is for you to copy and paste them. Okay? And what's great is you can just, click on this stack, scroll to a part of the page, and then you can copy it, right? So again, these settings are viewable no matter where you are on the page, okay? And again, these are just for copy and paste purposes. It doesn't matter if you change them. I don't recommend typing over them because it's going to make no difference and you're just going to lose what this says, okay? So go ahead and just copy that and you can paste it wherever you want. Again, these are just for usability sake to make it easier for you to copy and paste these macros and use throughout your pages. Okay, so now we're going to jump over into back to the admin side to the blog form stack. Okay, and let's look at some of the new options that we have here. First off, there is a new permalink stack. Your existing permalink stack will still work. It will say permalink legacy. You can add the new stack if you want, or if you're happy with how the current one is working, keep it. Okay, but the new permalink stack has some new options. Here we'll see that there is a permalink input, and what we can do is there are now more ways to determine how to calculate the permalink. Okay, the default is the way it's always been, which is based off the title and it is editable by the user. Okay, now we have 3 new options to automate a permalink, and this is to kind of make sure that the permalink is always unique. Okay, so the first one is title and timestamp. Now I should add that all 3 of these automated have the ability to preview the permalink. Okay, so let's quickly go ahead and let's just look at what this does. So here we have title and timestamp. So if I type in a title here, okay, what we'll notice here is that it's used the title, but it's also added a timestamp to the end of the title. Okay, this kind of makes sure that if I have multiple blog posts with the same title, they will be unique. Okay, so it's still kind of readable, but it does have this timestamp, at the end of it. Next up is a title plus UUID. So this is kind of like a unique identifier. Okay, so if I go ahead and change that, as we'll see here, I now have blog post and then a unique identifier at the end. Now the unique identifier is pretty much, it is guaranteed to be unique, right? The timestamp, 99.99% of the time it will be, but if 2 exact people create the same blog post at the same exact time, which is highly unlikely, it's possible, right? But this UUID is guaranteed to always be unique. Nothing will ever duplicate it, ever. Okay, so here we use the title and the UUID. And then we can also have just the UUID. So if you want, blog posts that are just completely random, right? There is no, text or readable text for the ID of that blog post. You can use just the UUID. Okay. Now, for this particular example, you probably don't want to have preview link turned on. So if I turn that off, we'll see that the permalink isn't displayed here, but it does get saved as that value. Okay. So again, this preview permalink just gives you a nice way to kind of see what the permalink will be when it's saved. There are a couple new stacks now inside the blog form. Okay, first off is the delete. Okay, so now we've always had the blog button where you can set that to be a delete, but now we have a specific delete stack. Okay, that you can put any button you want inside of it. Okay, so this just is a little bit nicer because I know a lot of us have our favorite button stacks that we like to use. And you can now add those and use those as a delete button inside the blog post form. Next up is there are 3 new stacks for select author, select category, and select tags. Okay, and let's see what those are. Let's just add select categories. We'll just play with one of them for right now. Actually, I already have one on the page. I have select author on here. So we'll see here that we have select author. Okay. Now, if I preview this page, you'll see that instead of it just being a text input, it is a select box that shows you all of the authors that are inside the system, and you can select from one. Now, what's great about this is it doesn't give the user the ability to create any new ones, right? So it is important that this option is, it is limiting, but that's by design, right? So it limits the users to just what you want. Now, inside the pre-fill area here, this is where you can add new things, right? So if I want to add, I think Rob's already in there. If I want to add Andrew Taverner, okay, to the author, I've added him into the pre-fill, and you'll notice that Tav is now there, Right? And if you just do a comma delimited list inside the prefill, it will, you can do the prefills that way. So you can have multiple items inside the prefill area. The same exact thing works for categories and tags. Now, another limiting thing for tags and categories using a select box is that you can only select one, right? You can't choose multiple. Now, we saw the date stack earlier. There is another new setting in here that's pretty important. There is a hidden option inside the date picker. Okay. Now, this is important because let's say you have a blog post where you don't care about the time, right? But you want to have a time on there. Okay. So what you'd want to do is you want to add a date stack to the blog form, but then hide it. So what it's going to do is by default, it takes the current time, right? And then it will save it as the current time. Now, what's important is when you edit that blog post, because the date field is there, it will always maintain that creation date. Okay. If you didn't have a date stack inside the blog form, whenever you edited that particular blog post, it would always update it with the current timestamp, right? So that's kind of a nice feature, right? It's a way of doing creation time versus modification time, right? But you can only have one date right now with blog posts. So if you want to make sure that the creation time, the original creation time of a blog post is always maintained, but you don't want the user to be able to edit that, just go ahead and add the date stack to the form, set it to hidden, and you'll be golden. Now, there's some behind the scenes stuff that happens when saving blog posts now. Okay. You'll probably notice if you've ever looked at some of the backup functionality of Total CMS, right? Total CMS does create backups of data, right? Now with blogs, it will save the last 10 edits for every single blog post, right? That's really cool. Before it only saved the last edit, right? Which wasn't really useful. So now it saves the last 10 edits for every single blog post, just like it does for all the other CMS elements. Okay, so that's really cool. If you ever need to revert back to a previous version, you have to go into the CMS datas folder, backups, and then you can browse through there and find the particular time-stamped backup for that blog post, and then you can restore that. Okay, so really cool feature for backups. Now, next up, this kind of crosses over a little bit with HipWigg. Okay, but we can now use Embed in all of our blog posts. This is really cool stuff, okay? So if you want to embed, let's say, a Twitter post, or if you want to embed a YouTube video, or you want to embed an Instagram post, or a code pen snippet, or a GitHub gist, right? Gist, however you want to pronounce it, okay? You can embed those directly into your blog posts super easily, okay? And there's actually two ways to do it. So let's say, for example, I wanted to embed this particular Instagram post onto a blog post. Okay. So what I would do is I'm going to copy the URL. I'm not going to take this last bit, this taken by Joe Workman. Okay. I'm just going to copy the main URL. Okay. And then I'm going to go into my blog post. And all I need to do is I'm going to do a square bracket. I'm going to paste in the URL and I'm going to close the square bracket. Now, I'm using HipWigg here, and HipWigg is going to want to add that as a link. So all I'm going to do is delete the link there, so unlink it. So again, it's inside the square bracket, simply the URL, okay? And let's go ahead and save this particular blog post. And if we were to go look at this blog post, you'll notice that down below here, I have my Instagram post directly inside my blog post, right where I placed that URL. Now, in order to do that, I did need to go into the content stack on the blog post side and check there is a new setting for enable Embed. Okay, this allows us to process the Embed, and then it will actually place it directly there on the page. Now, about 2 days after I implemented the feature that I just showed you, okay, the makers of HipWigg decided that they wanted to add Embed support directly into HipWigg as well. And I was like, what? I just finished that. So instead of removing my feature of Embed that I created and I developed, I decided to add HipWiggs as well. They both behave a little bit differently, okay? And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how you can do it via HipWigg. HipWigg does have a bunch of new options, but we're going to review some more of those things later on. but you'll notice that there's a new button here for HipWigg called Embed Lee, okay? And you need to check that. Once you do that, you'll notice that there is a new Embed Lee button inside HipWigg. Now, this is also available across all HipWigg instances, okay? But you can go ahead and click on that button. And what it does is it asks you for a URL. Funny enough, you'll see this is in Spanish because earlier on we set this project to use Spanish. Okay. I'm going to paste in that Instagram URL and we're going to insert that. And what's nice is here, you'll notice that it embeds the Instagram post directly into HipWigg. You can actually see it here. If you click on it, you can actually delete it as well. Okay, so it gives a little bit more user-friendly way where you can actually see everything. Okay, it kind of is crammed, maybe a little crammed inside HipWigg, but it's there. Now, a side effect is you see that there is this powered by Embed Lee advertisement that links off to Embed Lee. Okay, because it uses Embed Lee service, and that's part of the terms where if you want to use this feature, you have to have this little powered by Embed Lee advertisement below your embed. Okay, that does not happen if you use the feature that I showed you with the square brackets in the URL. Okay, but it is a nice way to do it. Okay, another way to do this is if there's this new quick insert button in HipWigg, you can click on that, and you'll notice that there's also Embed Lee here. You can click on that, paste in URL. Okay, so there's multiple ways of doing this now in HipWigg. Okay, but the fact is it's still the same. It does show you inside HipWigg, but it also has an advertisement to Embed Lee. Okay, you still there with me? Okay, because now we're going to get into something really cool, the new blog list stack. I need a drink of water really quick, though. Okay, so here we are in the new blog list stack. Now, your existing blog list stack that you have in a project will say blog list legacy. Now, the existing blog list legacy stack that you already have in your projects will continue to work. You do not need to use this new stack, but it does have some nice new features. Now, I should note, if you're using the masonry layout inside the blog list legacy stack, okay, the masonry layout is not supported currently inside the new blog list. So if you want to have the masonry layout, leave your existing blog list intact, okay? If you're not, you're probably going to want to switch to this blog list, this new blog list stack. And if you're using masonry, you might want to switch to it anyway because it's really, really cool. Okay. Now, this new grid function is something that's really cool. It uses some modern CSS that is inside the modern web browsers. Okay, it's called CSS Grid. Works really, really well, and it is fast. The previous blog list stack uses JavaScript to kind of position everything, and while it looked great most of the time, it could be buggy and annoying. And this new layout is awesome. It is rock solid. It uses pure CSS, zero JavaScript, which is awesome. Speed-wise, just everything. It is so much better, this new grid, okay? Now, there is this flex grid option, or flex width option, because on older versions of Internet Explorer, the new CSS grid is not supported. But it does have this flex grid fallback for those older browsers. Okay. Now you can also use Flex Grid, which we'll see in a second, for every browser, right? But the new grid layout will work on all modern web browsers, except the older versions of Internet Explorer. Thank you, Microsoft. So let's go ahead and start looking at some of the new options inside the blog list stack. Now, a lot of the settings are exactly the same, okay? But things have been reorganized a little bit, okay? So inside the general setup, we have a CMS ID, okay? By default, you'll notice that there are new buttons down here that are turned off by default. You can now configure image for authors, images for categories, and images for tags. More on how to configure these later on, okay? Here, this is where you define a gallery ID for where your author images are, and then you define a default image for authors that don't exist in that gallery, okay? Next, we have filter and sort. We have load count, how many blog posts do you want to load by default. All this filter stuff actually hasn't changed at all since the last update, okay? So none of this changed in 1.4. All these settings are exactly the same. Grid setup. This is completely new, And it is so much better than the current stack that's out there. The current one, if you have to define if you wanted like a card-based layout, the width, and then you'd have to fudge with the settings to kind of make it semi-centered. And this layout is so much better. We have multiple options. Okay, we have a default grid, option, which you can define how many cards you want, on a mobile device, medium, large, extra large. Okay, so we have mobile, medium mobile, phabulate, right? Tablet, and then desktop. Okay, so we have 4 different breakpoints. You could define how many blog posts you want per width. And then you can also have a flex width option, which basically is a fallback. And then we could define the gutter, right? So, that's the spacing in between each blog post. Now, what's super awesome about this new grid is that the blog post contents are edge to edge with your content. So everything will line up perfectly with the rest of your page content. You don't need to worry about, if things aren't going to line up. The outside edges of your blog posts will perfectly line up with the outside edges of your content as well. It is by far a much superior layout engine for blog. Now, that was grid. If we look at flex grid, flex grid, what it does is you define the minimum width at which a blog post will be. Okay, so for example, if I have this set to 250 pixels, when I'm at full desktop range, full desktop width, the browser knows that I can fit 3 of those wide if my minimum width is 250 pixels. Now, if I go ahead and start shrinking this down, it will dynamically, once the blog post hit 250 pixels or below 250 pixels, it will dynamically, change itself to be 2 wide. And so if we keep going down, it'll go to single wide. Okay, so this is just a great way of dynamically adding blog posts to your page and kind of having a flex layout, kind of an auto grid sort of thing. And it will automatically space things out. You can define a getter, but it will automatically space things out with the flex grid. Now, the last layout is really cool, and this is flex grid plus full width. Okay, same thing. We could define the size of the minimum size of a blog post that we want. We could define our gutter size, and then we have a third setting here for nth full width. Okay, so here what you'll notice is that when we're in full width, we have one blog post layout, but if we scroll down, we'll notice that we also have a second layout option now for when a blog post is full width. Okay, so this full width layout option only is displayed when you have it set to flex grid plus full width. And what this nth full width setting does is, what it means is every 6th blog post will be full width. Okay, so let's look at this in action. You'll see that the first blog post will always be full width. And if you remember, that setting was set to 6. So here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 6th blog post is full width. And what's cool is by doing this, we'll see that we get this cool kind of layout where the flex grid will automatically size 3 wide and then 2 wide. You're going to want to play with this nth full width option and see how things look, right? I don't think it really looks great at 1 or 2. If you set it to 0, what that will do is that will make the very first blog post full width, and the rest of them are basically straight up flex grid. No more are going to be full width. Only the very first one. Okay. 1 doesn't really make sense. 2, not really much either. At 3, it starts making a little bit more sense, right? So I had to have a 0 option in there. So 0, 1, and 2, it's up to you. But here we have an option where it's full width, then 1, 2, third is full width, 1, 2, third is full width, right? You kind of get the thing here, right? If I set it to 4, right, we're going to get 1, 2, 3, fourth is full width, right? If we keep going, we'll have 5. You can kind of see the pattern here. I'm going to have a full width, 1, 2, 3, up. Here we have the fourth one went full width because the flex grid is going to make the fourth one fill as much as possible. Okay, and if we shrink that down, it'll go to a 2 by 2. Okay, so what we could potentially do is in this option, let's say we wanted to have full width and then 2 and then the full width, 2 by 2 and then a full width. We could just increase this flex width to be A little bit larger, something like 500. Maybe 500 is too big. 500 is too big. Let's go a little bit more. Let's go 400. Right? So there. I've increased it to 400. So now I have a full width and then a 2x2 and then another full width and then a 2x2. And then, there would be another full width, but there's not a blog post in this example. Okay. So as you see, as this goes on, we saw six already here. Let's see what 7 looks like. I have no clue. I'm now exploring into untested waters. Let's take it width down a little bit. Let's see what this looks like. So here I have, here kind of what I would expect maybe is a 3x3, the full width, and then 3x3, and then it'd be a full width. So as you can see, I think 6 is kind of the sweet spot for kind of a very interesting, cool layout. But definitely go play ahead, play around with this and see what kind of interesting layouts you can build with the nth full width and then changing the flex width option to kind of, build some really unique layouts with blog. Further down, we have a few more options. Post color and background, this is kind of all the same. You can have alternating colors for backgrounds, for alternating posts. You can alternate the background colors. We can now have a little bit easier settings for rounded corners and adding borders to posts. Okay. If you click on these plus buttons, you have detailed settings, and that's for padding and border. Okay. There's new hover effects. Okay. By here, the default is going to be press. So if you see that, it kind of presses down on the page when you hover over it. We can also do raise or none. Okay. So raise will make the blog post when you hover over it kind of raise up. Okay. So when you hover over it, it'll raise up, and then press will kind of push it down. You can also do hover offset. Okay. So if you do raise and then do the hover offset of maybe -2, we'll see that kind of gives us what we would expect of where you hover over it and it kind of raises up. And if you look at the drop shadows, you'll see how that drop shadow is affected for raise versus press. Now, the rest of the settings in the blog list stack actually haven't really changed at all. The text styles, the image setups, and the load more, all of that is identically the same as it was previously. Now let's look at some of the other options that we have for stacks. First, similarly to the blog post stack, the blog list stack got a little organized in the child stacks menu. Okay, we have a words read time, just like you did on the blog post stack, so you can add in how long a blog post is. Okay. And again, it's identically, you set it up the same way as the blog post, where you set up the words per minute, and it will calculate it for you on the fly based on the number of words in a blog post. Next up is the image stack. The image stack got a really big revamp here because there's so many things that we want to do with images. Before, you can only display an image as an image, but now we can actually display the image as a background. And what that gives us is it allows us to control the height of a particular area. So in this particular example, I set the image to be a background image. I'm using the thumbnail, okay? And then I set the height, okay, of that particular image area to be 200 pixels. So it's setting that height to be 200 pixels, and then it's going to take the image and fill that background up for me. Now I can control the height of it, and I can really, have much nicer, maybe more condensed blog list layouts by not having to use the actual image dimensions, right? So that's really nice. You can also define a default image just as you could before, okay? Here you can now define borders, okay, and border radiuses on the image. You can give it some padding, and then you can also, there's a bunch of really great hover animations. Okay, so when you hover over it, you can have it blur. You can have the image grow, so scale up. You can have the image shrink, which is kind of scale back, and then you can have an inner shadow. Now you can combine, mix and match all of these effects. You don't have to do just one, right? And it's really cool. And what's awesome is all these hover animations work with images as well as slideshows. So if you notice, if we go to this hover image option, this first example here uses slideshows, right? But if I hover over an image, I still get that effect, okay? This particular one is using scale, blur, and shadow, okay? And if you notice, the slideshow is going in the background while I'm hovering it, right? So that's really cool. It makes for some really great layouts. I'm really excited to see what people build with these. I just think this layout is just too cool. Now the next stack that got really revamped was the layout stack. Okay, there's some really cool. It doesn't look like it, but it did get a lot of really great options here. Okay, background we still have the same. We can define a color background or an image background. When we have it set to a one column, we have access to a few interesting options. We have access to height. Okay, so we can make it a fixed height. Okay, fixed height and auto sized on mobile. Okay, and then we can do full height. Full height is really useful when we have it set to position absolute. Okay, so in position, you'll notice that we have a lot of options now. We have, before there was default, float left and float right. Now we can position it top, bottom, vertical, center, overlapping on the top and overlapping on the bottom. What I'm doing here is I have it set to position absolute top. Okay, now in this particular example, I'm building that hover image layout. Okay, because on hover, I'm going to show this layout stack on hover, which means by default, the image or the title and the date are hidden by default. Okay, but on hover, they are displayed. Now, if you notice here, first off, let's review this blog list layout here. Here I have a layout stack that is just pretty much all the default settings. Okay, then I have an image stack inside there, and then on top of that, I have this set to position absolute top. So what this is going to do is it's going to position itself to the very top of its parent, which in this case is the layout stack. And then I have it set to be full height, so it's going to go the entire height of that stack, which coincidentally is going to be the height of the image because the image is going to be the only thing that's inside that layout. So I have it set to be absolute top, so it's going to go all the way to the top, and then it's going to stretch the height of itself to be full width, or full height. Sorry, it's going to be full width and full height. Okay, are you still with me? Okay. Now I have a layout stack inside of that one. Okay. That what it does is it's set to vertically center the title and the date stack. Okay, so this particular layout stack, we have it set to be position vertical center, and that's the only thing that we have changed from the default. So what it's going to do, it's going to take these two contents, the title and the date, and vertically center it inside this layout stack, which we told to be the full height of the blog post. You can watch this again and see how that's done, right? But if you notice here, the height of the parent layout stack, okay, is the entire height of the image. When I hover over it, the stack that contains the title and the date is displayed because it says show on hover. Then that other layout stack centers the title and the date inside of that layout stack that's shown on hover. So there's a lot of interesting advanced things going on in this layout, but it makes for a really great presentation. Okay, obviously this long date doesn't look good, but we saw that earlier today. So the layout stack also got a few other things. You can add borders and border radiuses and padding, and you can also now add an inline style to the layout. Now you might be wondering what in the world is the overlapping options. Okay, overlap top and overlap bottom. I don't have an example of this right now, but I am going to build one on the fly. Oh boy. Okay, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and in this particular layout stack, I'm going to, and this is the default grid layout. Let's look at what this layout looks like. So what I want to do is I'm going to make this particular layout peak above the image. So it's gonna go and overlap the image. Okay. So let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to go ahead and let's just go ahead and do position overlap top, and we're going to overlap it by 100 pixels. Sure. Let's see how that looks. Great, look, it overlapped it, okay, but it's transparent. We don't want that. We want it to be a color, right? So let's go ahead and set this layout to have a background color of white. Oops. Okay. Now it went full width. So what we're going to want to do now is I'm going to add another layout stack. By the way, I didn't rehearse this. I'm doing all of this on the fly, so pardon me. Okay. So here we're going to go ahead and padding. I'm going to do top padding is 0. And the right and left padding is, let's keep those at 16. Okay, let's see how this looks. Oh, I need to do default on this layout, and then I need to move this layout up. So I'm going to do overlap top on this one. I think that will work. All right, so there we go. Right, I have my layout. It is now overlapping the image. Obviously, it's a little much, right? Probably want to reduce it a little bit. Let's go ahead and do like 50 pixels. Right? So there we go. There's an interesting layout where we have the content peaking above and overlapping the content above it, right? So that's overlap top. So interesting layouts with that. Now, the last new feature of the layout stack is that you can actually set the entire layout to be one big link. So here you can say link to post. Now, one thing that you're going to want to make sure that you do is that when you have link to post checked, you want to make sure that you go to all of the other objects inside there, like title and author and categories. You want to make sure that the link settings in those are turned off, okay? Because you cannot have a link inside of a link. It just could make some things just weird in your blog layout, okay? So if you want to make sure that the entire layout is one big link, make sure that all the components inside of that layout have links turned off. This is useful because now when I go to my blog layout, no matter where I click on this blog post, it's going to take me to the actual blog post. I don't need to make sure I click just on the title or on an author or on a read more button. This entire blog post is now one big button. Okay, so you might be wondering, right? We're going to be reviewing this really cool new feature about having images for authors, tags, and categories. Essentially, what happens here is we're going to create a CMS gallery, okay? We're going to have a gallery set up for author images, a gallery set up for tags, and a gallery set up for categories, okay? These are specific, galleries just for this feature, okay? So just again, we're gonna review all of this, but just so you know, it does use the CMS gallery stacks to integrate in with blog. So if we look at this admin page of the blog layout demo that we saw earlier, okay, we'll see that I have a blog list for my blog, and then below that I have a gallery set up for authors, categories, and tags, okay? Now, there's a special thing that we need to do here. When you upload an image, you need to be able to name the image exactly what we need, okay? So if we go ahead and look at my image here, and let's go ahead and look at the path, okay? What you'll notice is the name of the image, okay, here is joe-workman.jpg. Okay, this is very important because we have to, in order for it to be associated with me, Joe Workman, I need to just make sure that I name the image properly. Okay, and it needs to be my name where the spaces are now dashes. So if you are ever nervous about the name that you need to name your author or your category or tag, just go ahead and go into your blog list layout that you've published, okay? And if you hover over the actual name, you'll see, in the browser tooltip, the actual name will be in the URL, okay? Now, in this particular example, I actually have my layout set to be one big button, okay? But by default, the author when you click on an author, it'll actually filter the blog list for all posts for that author. Okay, so when you hover over an author name on a blog post, it should show you the name inside the little tooltip, or if you click on it, you'll see it in the browser URL bar. Okay, so for me, it would be Joe-Workman, so on and so forth. Again, it is spaces are replaced with dashes. If you have a dash in your name, the dash is still a dash, so don't worry about that. It's only that spaces are replaced with a dash. Okay. Some other weird characters, if you have like an ampersand and things like that, those are stripped and removed. But for the most part, it's just spaces in your name that are replaced with dashes. And the same thing applies for categories and tags. Here I have, a set of categories. This one, if I look at this one is a category of work, right? So it's work.jpg. Okay. This one is vacation.jpg. Okay. If you further down, we have SEO. This is SEO.jpg. Okay. And so on and so forth. Okay. So let's jump into Rapidweaver and see how we implement these inside of our blog lists. So in this particular blog list, I only wanted to use author images. So what I did is I clicked on author. You give it the gallery ID of the author's gallery. Okay. So if we look at the admin page here and look at the gallery stack that I'm using for the authors, okay, the gallery ID, the CMS ID is set to authors. Okay. Categories is set to categories, and tags is set to tags. You can name them whatever you want. You just need to make sure that the CMS ID here matches what you have set up inside the blog list stack. So here I have the author's ID set to authors. Now, it's important to also define a default image. And the reason for this is that let's say that you have an author that doesn't have an image. Okay, you want to make sure that you have a default image there. So you probably want maybe a little person or something like that, right? So this is, here's like a funky little, author's kind of a writer image that I threw in there for when an author doesn't exist. The same thing happens for galleries and tags. You set up the gallery ID for categories and tags, and then you can easily provide default images for those as well. Now let's look at the author stack. Okay, authors, categories, and images and tags all work very similarly in terms of layout. So for author, you can have text or an image, right? So if you want just the text, you'll notice that the settings up here, you can have text or image, and you can toggle, you can have one or the other or both. So if you want just an image, you can turn off the text and it'll show you just the image. If you want to have the image and the text, you can. If you want to have just the text, you can do that as well, okay? When you have an image, you can define whether or not you want it to be circle image, okay? You can set the size of the image, and then the margin, which is basically the separation between the image and the text. Now for alignment, you have full alignment control, so you can have it on the left, you can have it on the right. Now if you choose center for author, what it does is it puts the author image above the author name. Okay, so that's 3 different interesting layouts that we have available for author. Now I should note the actual author image will only be displayed on publish. Inside edit mode and in preview, you will see this just little default author image that we have baked into the stack. Now to show you what this looks like with categories and tags, I'm going to go ahead and add a tag stack to the page. I've gone ahead and let's just go ahead and turn on images, okay? And what you'll see is what it will look like when you have multiple tags or multiple categories. Tags and categories behave exactly the same, okay? So when you have multiple, they'll just be kind of in line with each other. Again, you can turn off the text if you want to have just images, or you can have multiple, okay? You can have text and images. You can define, just like in author, whether or not it's a circled image, and then you can define the size and margins just like you could before as well. Now the alignment here is a little bit different than author. If you set these to be right aligned, they'll just move to the right. And if you set them to be center, they'll just center, okay? It won't change the layout so one's on top of the other. It'll just center them, but it will keep them all in line. Same thing if you have just images, it'll center those images in line. So if there's multiple, it's not going to take up multiple lines, right? It's just going to be all inside one line. And just like an author, if in preview and in edit mode, you'll just see this default image here. Okay, but on publish, you'll see the actual images that are used inside the tags and categories galleries. So if we preview this, you'll see what it kind of looks like. Obviously, when we publish this, we won't see this default tag image. We'll see the actual one that's inside the galleries. But it gives you a great preview on what is possible, with your layout and how things are going to look. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at some of the other things outside of blog that we now have in Total CMS 1.4. Okay, feeds got a couple really nice updates. I know a lot of you have been wanting some bug fixes for feeds, and we finally have them, right? Feed images can finally be edited again. So if you have a feed item and you want to edit the image, you can go ahead and now officially edit your feed images, and it all works. You no longer need to delete and recreate a feed item. I'm sorry it took so long. Next is you can also change the sorting of your feeds. So before it was always newest to oldest, you can now sort them oldest to newest, right? So you can reverse the order of your feeds, which gives us a little bit more flexibility on what we can use feeds for, okay? Next up for images and galleries. First off, galleries get PNG white background support, okay? It doesn't have official PNG support for full transparency. All images and galleries are still transferred and converted to JPEGs, but they no longer transparent pixels are now changed to white instead of black. So your images will look much, much better. If you upload a transparent PNG into a gallery, the backgrounds of those PNGs will now be white instead of black. Again, a really cool change. It was kind of a tricky one, but I'm glad we figured that out because it really does look a lot better as the white background instead of black. Okay. Next is the image bar. So when you upload an image, there's a little on images. There's a little toolbar, right here. Let's jump in and have a look. So when you upload an image, let's go ahead and upload a new image into this stack here. I'm just going to go ahead and upload this one. Okay. So I uploaded an image to this gallery. Okay, and it's uploading and it's done. Now, before, in order to access any of the these options here, you had to refresh your page, but no longer. Okay, you can now hover and have access to all of these buttons immediately when an image is uploaded. So you can get all the copy path information. Okay, you can edit the alt tag. Okay, you can set it to you can edit the alt tag, you can set an image as featured, you can delete it right away, right? So it's really cool. This works for galleries and normal images. As soon as you upload it, these actual buttons are ready to be available right now. And you can immediately reorder the image as well, okay? So really cool stuff. Next up, inside the copy image paths lightbox, you'll notice that there are little links with each path. Those are links to the actual image. So that gives us a little nice things. If you just want to, you can go ahead and click out and open the image in the browser. Just a little convenience if you just want to have a little link that takes you to that particular image. Okay. Next up, as we look at more of the release notes, we have lots of new macros available. Okay. I'm not going to show you how to use all the macros. Hopefully you know how to use macros. There's a bunch for dates in blogs. There's stuff for featured images in galleries and things like that. Really cool stuff. Okay. Now, another really important fact is that the old style macros, if you're using the old syntax from version 1.0 days, okay, which was %CMSID%, right? It wasn't like this function where it was, a function name, parentheses, CMSID, close paren, and then %, right? If you're using the old style macros, they will no longer work in Total CMS 1.4, okay? I've turned them off just for performance reasons. I don't want to process two different styles of macros. The new ones are so much better and so much faster that I wanted to, get as much performance for you guys in 1.4. So we disabled the old style macros. And just as we saw earlier in the blog macro stack, inside CMS Core, you can copy and paste all of the available macros. So you can go ahead and copy those and paste them wherever you want. You don't need to try to type them out and get it wrong, right? Macros can also have hierarchies now, so you can actually define, instead of just a word, it could be kind of like a folder structure. So you can do group/title. That could be useful if you just want to, a little bit better way of organizing your CMS IDs. Now, we've seen a lot of the HipWigg enhancements kind of throughout this video already. We saw some of the localization stuff. We changed inside Admin Core our language to Spanish, and all the HipWigg tooltips and little language things within HipWigg automatically changed to Spanish. Okay, so again, we have 7 languages options available for HipWigg and dates and all of the other things, right? Other things, we saw the quick insert toolbar earlier. So we have that new quick insert toolbar. We have the ability to customize font sizes inside HipWigg now. Okay, let's quickly go ahead and look at that. If we look at Admin Core now, some of the buttons here for HipWigg got reorganized a little bit because we now have Embed Lee support. So the link got moved from the content up to text. We have an extra option that adds a little bit more dividers in here. Okay, and then down here at the Pro settings, okay, we now have settings for Pro toolbars. Okay, where these options were here before, but they're just new. Okay, and so we have Pro toolbar. Whoops, and then we also have the Pro options for the quick insert. So this allows us to customize all the options that are inside the quick insert button. Okay, next is some of the Pro settings for format, color, and text sizes. Format and color were already there, but this text sizes one is new. So this allows us to customize all of these sizes that are inside that text sizes drop down. Next up, you'll be happy to know that inside images, you can actually drag and drop your own MP4 files and upload them directly into HipWigg and have them embedded directly onto the page. Be very careful with this, right? Obviously, we don't want to have people uploading, gigabyte files here. That's why I was hesitant of adding it before. I definitely recommend, you promote your customers, put in YouTube or Vimeo URLs or things of that nature instead of uploading their own MP4s. But the option is there if you want it, okay? So yes, now you can upload your own video files, as well as still embed YouTube and video posts straight from here just by pasting in the URL. That's always been available. Next up, if you upload an image into HipWigg, so once you upload an image, you can go ahead and click on it, and HipWigg will give you a little toolbar here. A lot of these options will do various things. One of the new options that we have here is a full width option. So if you go ahead and set an image to be full width, what it will do is it will allow your image to break out and go full browser width. It'll break out of your layout regardless of where your layout is. It'll make that image go entirely full width of the browser to kind of give you an interesting blog layout like we see here. And last but not least, finally, the main color styles that we have here inside Admin Core will now properly style HipWigg editors as well as the other CMS admin areas. So everybody, that pretty much does it for Total CMS 1.4. I know this was a pretty probably exhausting talk, right? My voice is getting tired already, right? I have no idea how long I've been going for, but it's been a long time. So I went all the way through and looked at pretty much every detail of the update. I don't think I missed any options or settings. Hopefully I didn't. But hopefully you understand the power of these new options that we have available to us, right? And some of the amazing things that we can do with blog. I mean, I've already seen some of the layouts that beta testers have been using over the past few weeks, and it's just mind-blowing. You look at the page and you go, whoa, that's done with RapidWeaver? Whoa, that's done with Total CMS Blog? Like, I'm very proud to see where Total CMS has matured to make such advanced, beautiful layouts. So simple, right? So I hope you enjoyed Total CMS 1.4. Please share your websites. Show us what you're making with it. I love to see what people are building using all of our tools. So please share on Weaverspace. Submit your sites to the designs gallery. Go ahead and leave a review on RealMac on the RealMac community, right? A RapidWeaver community over there. if you love Total CMS, please go ahead and just type a little review, give it a couple star ratings, right? Like it, and put in an actual review. I would love it. I'd really appreciate that. So I can't wait for 1.5. Man, what Total CMS 1.5 is going to be mind-blowing. It's going to contain support for a new feature called Dynamics. And I've talked a lot about Dynamics. It's going to be the ultimate CMS solution for RapidWeaver. Think of it as blog, but you guys, majority of people are using blog, not even for a blog, right? And which is cool, which is totally cool, right? I love people taking my products and using them for your, right? I mean, yes, it's branded as a blog because that's what it's what it was made for, but you're repurposing it for product pages and for project management stuff, and it's just what people are using to blog for is, like I said, most people are using it not even for a blog, right? It's really cool as a blog, but it's amazing to see what other people are using it for, right? And Dynamics is going to take all those use cases and just explode them to a whole nother level. Because think of blog with unlimited amount of fields, right? It's going to be really cool. It's going to be the first paid add-on for Total CMS because it's going to power my new website. I am working with the talented hipster weaver John Hawkins on the new and improved Weaver Space site that will house all of the Joe Workman stacks, and I'm really excited about that. It's going to be mind-blowingly amazing, and I can't wait to share with you how I build it, how I manage it, and how I did it all inside RapidWeaver. Be ready to just be mind blown. It's going to be really cool. I can't wait to give that power to all of you guys, right? So that you guys can then build amazing things as well. But I regress. Total CMS 1.4 is still awesome. The new blog layout engine and some of those bug fixes that we fixed for other things just really smooth out Total CMS and make it a really stellar product. I think it can now go toe-to-toe with almost any blogging platform out there, and I'm happy to say that. It's fast, it's beautiful, and I can't wait to see what you build with it. So until next time, guys, we will see you soon. Bye.